Welcome to Valemount Votes. This is VCTV's one-on-one interviews with the candidates for mayor, for regional district, for council, for school district 57. And here today with us is Sandy Salt, who's a candidate for mayor. Welcome, Sandy.
Thanks, Gord. Thanks for having me.
You bet. I think before we get into the questions that we have for you, it'd be nice to let people know a little bit about you. So why don't you give us a few seconds about yourself?
All right. I've been living in Valemount since 2006. I'm married. We just celebrated our 23rd wedding anniversary in September. So
congratulations.
Thank you. It's you know, been a long journey together, and of that, the last 12 years I've been here in Valemount and loving every minute of it. I got involved quite early on since moving to Valemount with local government politics. I actually first was a staff member at the village, where I really gained a lot of quick knowledge on the job, and found that I really enjoyed it, and decided for the 2011 campaign to put my name forward for a candidate for council. I wanted to have a voice, and as a staff member, you're making recommendations to council, but
not making the decisions.
Not making the decisions, and sometimes I felt I wanted to give more and say more, so I took that big, huge pay cut and went to the other side, and I've really have been enjoying my time as a councillor for the village. I feel much more connected to the community. I am approachable. I have people come up to me when I'm at the grocery store. It's one of the things, and it's okay. Yes, it's my time, but it's okay, because I want to hear what you have to say, and if you have a concern, and that's sometimes some of the best times to hear from people when you're in a casual atmosphere like that. So.
Right. Here's a fun question for you. When you're in the grocery store and you're shopping, are you cognizant of what you're buying? So you say, I better not buy a lot of junk food in case people...
That is a good question. No, I will be, though. I think quite often I've been caught either in the produce aisle or in the dairy aisle, so I haven't gotten to the junk food yet. So. Right.
As soon as you get in the door, there she is.
There she is, yeah.
Well, that's great. So this is your second term on council?
Second term, yeah, and it's been a great experience, and the wheels of government don't move quickly, and so even though I've been in for 7 years, there's still a lot that I'd like to see through to completion, and I've been involved with some projects that started even before I got elected from when I was on staff, so I would really, it's been 11, 12, sometimes 13 years that some of these things have been in the works. So I'd really like to see some of them through, and that's why. I
know you were also held a position, and still do, with the Yellowhead Trans-Canada Highway Association. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that is a 4-province association. It was formed early in the years with the 4 provinces, British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. Just celebrated 70 years last year in existence of the association. It's gone through a lot of changes, but it's really about advocating for highway safety, improvements to the highway. The ultimate goal is to have 4-laning all the way from Winnipeg, Manitoba, all the way to the island to Haida Gwaii and Queen Charlotte's. And
wow, that'd be great.
It would be
Make
great.
things a lot safer.
Yeah. We also promote tourism and industry, economic development and growth as well. So it's a lot of working. We've really taken on a new role in working with chambers of commerce in this last year. We've engaged with them to try and see what we can do to partner with them to help support them and their membership, and continue that way, because it's the commercial goods travel along the highway, and without that, businesses can't run.
Yeah. So you're a very busy person. You also have, in addition to your part-time council position, what do you do for a living?
I currently work for the Valemount Learning Centre. I'm admin services there and also their program coordinator. which is arranging a lot of the continuing education courses for people for various things, a lot of special interest, personal interest ones. A lot of the jobs, so, or a lot of the courses are specifically for work safety, occupational first aid, there's WMIS, transportation endorsement. Then there's the special interest and personal interest ones like firearm safety and hunter, the core hunter training.
Right.
And we have physical ones like physio education and painting classes. So it's a whole variety, and it's really interesting and fun just trying to find some new courses. So I have some new things that I'm working on, hoping to bring to the community. And
Why don't you teach a course in municipal politics?
I kind of thought about that. Yeah, I kind of
got the experience.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so at this time we're giving all the candidates an opportunity to make some opening remarks, up to 3 minutes, and you can either do it to the camera over my shoulder there, or we can just talk as we're talking here, whatever you'd like to say. Whenever you're ready, just go right ahead.
Well, again, as everyone knows, I've been involved on council for 7 years, and I've really been building up my connections and contacts. Like I said, I've been involved heavily with the Trans-Canada Yellowhead Highway Association, so I've developed a lot of contacts with members of government, mayors, councillors, ministries, and the federal government. We've been working with the federal Minister of Transportation as well. So I've really developed a lot of contacts in our own province. I've really developed very close relationships with people from other communities that we share similar interests and problems that, by collaborating and working together, instead of reinventing the wheel, sometimes you're able to borrow from someone else what they've already gone through. And I just really felt that it was time to move on up to the next step. I still really wanted to be involved, and I still really want to be on council, but I was feeling that I was ready to take that step to run for the chair of mayor. And I'm really hoping that everyone will consider casting their vote for me on October 20th.
Great. Thank you very much. So we have a number of questions for you, and they're split into topics. So the first topic that we'll start with is housing. It's a very important topic right now. We're experiencing a housing shortage in Valemount. It's affecting home buyers, renters, seniors, anyone looking for affordable housing or housing period in terms of what's there. Some are even calling it a housing crisis. It's definitely a serious situation that makes it difficult for not only the local people, but for those who may be considering coming here to work or just to live. We've heard stories about qualified candidates coming into town, ready to take a position, cannot find accommodation that's suitable for them, either on a rental or purchase basis, and having to turn down the work, and that's not a good situation.
No.
Right. The current council has taken action on this. During your term, the council struck the Affordable Housing Committee to deal with housing issues, data collection, strategic planning, funding of projects, bylaws, zoning issues. And also, during this last term, council agreed in principle to set aside some land for an affordable housing project in a location to be determined. So those are two steps that have been taken. So we have two questions for you on housing. The first is, what do you believe is the role, or should be the role, of municipal government in dealing with the housing situation in Valemount and the issues that we have been facing and will be facing in the future? And after that, we'll talk about your ideas about housing. Okay.
It's not the role of the local government to provide housing, but we can work together in partnership by providing a committee, by working in partnership with other organizations that may be formed in the community. For example, we have a society that has recently been formed that is really working hard at addressing the concerns of housing.
You're speaking about Valemount Affordable Rental Society.
Now, I know their initial first phase of what they're wanting to do has a lot of people feeling that they're not dedicated to the community, and I understand those concerns, because I feel that they only are addressing student housing for Valemount College. And that's not, it's true, but not completely true.
Right.
They are willing to open up those units for other people until the time comes that the college is fully operational 100% with students needing that accommodation.
Mm-hmm.
I do know, though, that they are also working on a phase 2 of their project.
Right.
The land that they recently acquired has also a part that had been consolidated, has land, just land, that they would like to develop new housing on.
Mm-hmm.
And that, from what I've understood from conversations, is they're planning on doing some housing for the community. Mm-hmm. So there have been, I think, some misunderstandings, and it's unfortunate, but I'm saying, you know what, that was then, let's move forward and let's work together. And that's what the local government can really do, is we can work in partnership. We can provide land, for example. We can help with amending bylaws and zonings to make it easier. We have the ability to waive some fees, waive
development
permits,
construction costs, yeah.
development cost charges and that. Mm-hmm. So we have the ability, we just need to put that in place, put those bylaws in place, and that is something that I really would like to focus on. Is I want to say yes and make things move forward. Like you said, this has become a very serious problem where working for the Learning Center, we post jobs that are available for local employers.
Right.
And I know the struggle that a lot of them have had is that they can't fill positions because either one, the local people already are working 2 or 3 jobs, or 2, they can't afford a place based on some of the pay. So there's a double-edged sword. And then there have been people that have turned down positions that they've been prepared to relocate here, but couldn't find housing. Mm-hmm. So they've turned down positions and not moved to the community.
Right.
So it to me is a very important project that we need to work forward on. We need to help our housing committee move ahead a little quicker as well. You know, yes, we've done a lot, but I think we need to be able to be more open to help them move further,
right.
faster.
Things are possibly only going to get worse once the ski hill is developed and the extra staff comes in for that, and the ancillary services that are always popping up in communities where a ski hill builds, like a ski place, a ski shop in town, or sporting goods, or other things, right? Everybody's going to need housing, and yes, it's a challenge. Okay, the second question on this is more of a what do you believe council should be doing over the next 4 years to deal with the housing issues? So I know you talked about what you think the role is. Are there specific plans that you have in your mind, or ideas that you have for how you can push things ahead in the next 4 years?
Yeah, there certainly have been some more doors opened up too, as far as how the local government can work with the BC Nonprofit Housing Association as well. They're helping to provide tools and a toolkit for local governments to work along with different agencies to help, you know, build affordable housing, or replace, you know, there are some existing buildings, so repair and replace them and turn them into affordable housing. So to me, it would be what our council the next term can do is make sure to help with making sure we're still following legislation that we absolutely have to, but not make it so prohibitive and difficult for people. Let's make it so that, you know what, let's waive development cost charges for projects that we can waive. There are stipulations, but one of the ones we can do for sure is for non-profit organizations that are creating affordable housing. Mm-hmm. We can amend our bylaws so that they're not so stringent. We can amend zoning to allow multiple housing and various levels of types of housing. Right. You know, there are a lot of things that we could do and need to do, and so we need to start addressing that quicker, sooner, you know, because it does take time, and so that we have everything ready for when people are ready to put shovels in the ground. And so it's really about working with When I was at UBCM, I learned about the BC Housing Hub. It's a new organization that's been created with the new provincial government, and working with them too, working very closely with them as partnering. They have, you know, different tools to help us as well. So it's you know, it's always learning what's out there. There's always new things coming up. So it's researching, learning what we can do, amending our zoning and bylaws to accommodate as best as we can, while still protecting the liability and of the village and the taxpayers.
Right. And it's multifaceted too in terms of housing. It's not just affordable housing for low-income families. It's seniors housing. It's housing for First Nations people. It's housing for social housing, such as, you know, houses for women fleeing relationships and things of that nature. Right. All those things are mandates of BC Housing and kind of pillars of their housing projects as well.
Absolutely, absolutely, and so that's also working with Robson Valley Community Services. They take care of a lot of those social housing issues. And that's to making sure that the public understand as well that affordable housing doesn't mean social housing.
Right.
A lot of people get scared and nervous when they hear affordable housing.
Right, they think it's a slum going to be developed in their backyard kind of thing. Right.
Automatically they think that, and that's not the case. Like you pointed out, there are various pillars of housing.
Right.
And, you know, we certainly need every one of those. And affordable housing is even for families that have, you know, let's say a family of 6, 2 parents and 4 children. They need to have a bigger home, but, you know, they can't afford a bigger home for their family of 4 based on, you know, the jobs that are available. So, like, that's where I say sometimes people are working 2 or 3 jobs just to be able to afford to have a home, to put a roof over their heads and take care of their family. So and then there is the pay bracket too that, you know, BC Housing uses for what they consider affordable, and it was quite shocking. It's much higher than most people realize.
Right.
So,
yeah. Much higher than most people in Valemount are making.
Making exactly
right.
More than I'm making.
Yeah,
so
yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And the other thing is for those people who have families or who have growing families and need to look for larger places, because of the housing shortage, all the rental rates are going up, all of the sales prices for lots and for housing and everything else is going up.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a, you know, it's a, what would you call it, like a hamster wheel, right, of bad things happening here right now. So, but on the positive side, and I know that I'm involved with the Seniors Housing Society, and I've been doing a lot of research because we're looking at how can we expand. There's a waiting list there, and there's needs for it. But this is kind of what I call the golden triangle time of projects here, because the federal government has a priority for housing. The provincial government has a priority for housing. BC Housing has a priority for all types of housing. The Columbia Basin Trust has money available for types of housing. So with all of those in place, they're really saying, please bring us a project, because we don't want all the money to go to the Lower Mainland. We want to have some projects in the north here, right? Yes. And so we've got the political will right now to do it. We've got the money set aside to do it. We just have to come up and get our plan and our act together and say, here, we have a great plan, right?
Exactly,
on what we can do here.
That's where I know, you know, both Valemount Affordable Rental Society through their Columbia Basin Trust application, and also through the Village of Valemount Housing Committee. Both of those had asked for funds to hire a consultant, because that's how you get those plans. The consultant will take a piece of property and look at it, and how can it best be utilized? What kind of housing do we want to put on there? So those are the steps that are being taken, and like you said, we need to just keep getting everything, all of our ducks in a row, so that we can for sure go after those funds and get some of these things happening. Because like you said, we need to have this up in the north and not in the Lower Mainland. It's a problem all over the whole province. But like I said, we need to be able to be jumping on some of these things too.
Right. So. And I don't want to compare Valemount to Whistler of today. However, there could be comparisons made to Whistler of 20 years ago. And at that time, the municipal government looked at it and said, maybe it was even before the municipal government, said, we need a housing authority, because we want people who are working here to be able to buy a home here. Right, or to be able to have decent, affordable rent. So they created, the municipality, once it was formed, created a housing authority. And that's an umbrella organization. So they don't have a seniors housing authority and an affordable housing society. They don't have 3 or 4 people working on the same project. They have one thing there. And what they've tried to do is take the land out of the equation. So by the municipality owning the land and putting it into a trust, you can take a huge amount of the cost of buying a home out. So, you know, if you go and buy a home in Valemount right now, you're probably looking at a $300,000, right? If you took the land out of that, that's probably now you're down to $200,000 or maybe $150,000. And now it's starting to become more affordable for people. So what the housing authority there did was they bought the land and they made covenants on it. They said, okay, you can own this, but when you leave, you can't flip it for double what you paid. I think they might have like a 10% margin or something, and they factor in any improvements you've made and that type of thing. Right? But it's keeping it affordable for the long term, right? Not just for a few years kind of thing.
For sure.
And available, because I mean, you've been to Whistler many times and you were just there for UBCM, right? And you know that to go and stay there is very expensive, right? But if they had to have their staff living in all the small communities around there, it would be very difficult for them, right? So they've created a kind of an interesting thing. We have the parallel here in that we have potentially an international class ski resort going to be developed here, right? And we also, and that's, right now we have a housing crisis just based on what's here now. When that comes in here, who knows? So perhaps council can take a lead in terms of bringing people together that are working on these things now and saying, you know, we don't need 5 groups working on the same thing. We need one group working together to make projects work. One of the things that we're talking about with the seniors is not just building more residential type housing, but maybe doing unique things like seniors housing mixed with family housing.
You're right
so
on track with
so you're
what
not
I'd
warehousing your seniors, you're kind of creating an energy sort of thing there.
That's something I would love to see in our community, the mixed housing, because it just, it then gives seniors an opportunity to have like a new family that, you know, could be there to help them out and take care of them. That is definitely one of the things I would love to see have here.
I don't want for both, right?
Everyone to be segregated into their different areas.
Right, and it just works better. The seniors, you know, there's an energy, a lifeblood kind of thing coming in from the younger kids and dealing with that. And then from the kids' point of view, it's like having another set of grandparents, right? But those are just some ideas, right?
Yeah, no, and I think in one of my responses to one of the newspapers that is one of the issues I've had over the years, that I would like to see more of the organizations working together. Like I said, instead of everyone going after their own thing, and I understand everyone has their own mandate, but I think we need to have more collaboration and working together and partnering. And like I said, might find out that you're all working on something similar, and why not pool your resources to make it happen?
Sure.
Right?
I mean, you've got 2 boards of directors with 5 to 7 people on there. If you make one board of directors combined, now you have your volunteers and allow them to free up to do other things, right? You and I both know we're on multiple committees and things, and the burnout is real for volunteers, right? And what you don't want when you're tackling a housing problem, which is a major thing, is burnout. You want energy, you want ideas, right? You want people to come up with some creative ways to do things. And this is a creative time, so I'm hopeful that that the new council, they are recognizing that there is a need here and that they do play a role. In the past, it was always, you know, municipalities were for roads, for sewers, for garbage collection, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that has changed now, and people understand that somebody has to take the lead, right? You don't necessarily have to do it, but you have to take the lead. And maybe that's just bringing the parties together and saying, let's get you guys working together and let's see how we can help you, right? Make this work.
The local government doesn't always have the staffing and resources, but we certainly, like you said, can get the parties together and let's work together that way. And, you know, like I said, take the lead and work in collaboration, because that's how it's going to happen. And I am really excited about this new council coming up. You know, I don't know who's going to be elected in, but from what I've been hearing, it sounds like a lot of us are on the same page And so I'm really excited for the future of Valemount.
Great, great.
I'm hearing some really great things.
And let's not forget our wonderful ally, Shirley Bond, who
Yes.
every time I see her says, what can I do to help, right?
She
that's her
is
mandate.
fabulous. She keeps in touch, and she wants to know, so if she doesn't know that there's a problem, if you're a part of any one of the organizations that's having some challenges, if you're trying to accomplish something and you're hitting roadblocks, trying to get funding through, a different agency, or if you have funding that's being taken away, you're losing it for some reason, she likes to know these things. She wants to be able to try and help any way she can. And if she doesn't know, she can't do that. So I know I've been told, just send off an email or pick up the phone, call me. I may not be available right now, but I'll get back to you quickly. And she does. She carries on her promises, and she comes through and follows up. So that's one thing I know. You can certainly feel comfortable contacting her.
Just like you said, with 11 and a half years in municipal government, she's been our MLA for, what is this now, 18 years, 17 years?
17 going on 18,
yeah,
I believe
exactly.
she said. Yeah.
And she's been, Attorney General, she's been Tourism Minister, she's had multiple portfolios. She knows everybody. She knows the system. She knows how to get things done, even in a time when they're not the governed.
Right.
Right? So and that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
She still worked with the NDP government to get the ancient forest going and get that up. And in a very rare thing that you don't see these days, when they opened the ancient forest, the NDP government invited her to be there and to speak. And that's pretty unusual, right? You don't see that kind of bipartisanship in politics anymore.
She is very well respected in the legislature.
Anyway, she can help as well as that. So I'm going to move on to our second topic, which is economic development / economic diversity. We just talked about we're in a growth spurt right now. Homes are being built, homes are being sold, new businesses are opening here in Valemount, new industries. Tourism continues to be on the rise, which is a great thing for us. However, there's still much that can be done to foster future growth, particularly in the business side, in the industrial side, whether that's light industrial or whatever. But there's areas there that can be focused on. So I'm going to talk about this in two parts. The first part is in terms of economic development, just a general kind of bread and butter. I'm running for mayor candidate question is, what are your ideas for how to stimulate economic development in Valemount? And area, we got to add that.
Yeah, I think it involves being very much engaged in knowing who is approaching our community to open up businesses. If there isn't that open communication and transparency, you don't always know. And I'm speaking from experience. I don't always know who's come to the village office to propose or pitch a business opportunity that they're looking at opening in Valemount. So first of all, I think it's making sure that we're informed as to who's coming forward, and then seeing what we can do to actually say, yes, we are open for business. Make sure that our bylaws aren't so stringent that we're turning people away or making it too difficult for them to open up a business or grow and expand. We need to continue supporting our small mom and pop shops and the small entrepreneurs that are doing amazing things. We have a couple that used to own the Petro-Canada, now own the Home Hardware. They've moved over to the Home Hardware. We have our Three Ranges Brewery, the amazing work that they're doing there. The Gathering Tree is such a popular spot. We have Infinity that offers so many wonderful services. If we didn't have Infinity, there'd be a lot of services that they offer that people would have to go elsewhere for. So I think it's making sure that we really continue keeping the close communication and contact with our local businesses that are already in existence, making sure that we continue to help them if there's something they need, if there's wanting to expand, that we work with them, hopefully, do zoning amendments, whatever they might need. And like I said, making sure that we're informed as to who is anticipating coming. I'm very pleased that we have the Valemount Industrial Park and what the Valemount Community Forest is, working on doing there. So that can help with, like you said, the light industrial and possibly heavy industrial. And I know they've been in conversations and working there. So again, it's let's keep the doors open. Let's not say no so much. Let's try and make sure that we find out what we can do. Is it something the community wants? Because again, there are some things that maybe the community doesn't want here. So it's keeping that open conversation and dialogue as well with our citizens.
Right.
And that's where I think we've really lacked a lot in this last term. And even in the previous term, we did have our community conversations, but I know a lot of feedback from the citizens is that they didn't really like that format. So you know what? Let's fix that. Let's try a different format. I really want to have more engagement with the citizens.
Got a nice question for you coming up. All about that.
All right.
We'll cover that.
I'm beating you to it.
In general, would your recommended approach be to go out in the past? You know, we were once a mill town, right? Very mill dependent. That closed, and unfortunately, you know, nearly half the population left. We've kind of shifted over to the tourism side, which has filled in the gap. But tourism is susceptible to fluctuations too. The dollar, the exchange rate, incidents like 9/11 had a major impact on tourism for years afterwards, right? Yeah. So, you know, we have our eggs in that basket now. Is your idea as a potential mayor, would it be to go out and look for those big one-off type industries that would employ 200 people at a higher paying rate, or work with what we have here in the community in terms of assets, as you mentioned, the community forest and the types of small businesses that we have that could be, you know, light industrial or value-added businesses like breweries and bakeries and those types of things. What in general is your your favorite approach?
My favorite, honestly, I mean, it would be great to have that one great big industry employing hundreds of people. Whether that will ever happen again, maybe. What I think would be great is if we could get one of the big technology sector businesses. It'd be great to have like a Google hub here. You know, where it's people that are working in technology and responding to World Wide Web issues. Don't know if that would happen because, again, that takes reliable power and things like that.
High-speed internet?
High-speed internet to run those. Now, we do have high-speed internet, but I know it's not always reliable. That's part of the problem.
There's a definition of high-speed internet, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Our high-speed internet is what you have in the cities, right?
Exactly. So that's the differing, you know, problems. I mean, we still have, I think, some people still in the valley that have dial-up, you know, depending on where they're located.
Right.
So anyway, it would be that, but I think really the best sustainable approach for our community are the smaller light industry that are going to employ, you know, 25 to 50 employees. The specialty mills, like what we have out at the industrial park right now. We have Valemount Stone Company, we have Robson Valley Timber, we have Jason Alexander with his Cedar Valley Holdings. You know, we keep building on those.
Right.
I think that's
so instead of one 200 employee, we have 10, 20 employee, right?
Yeah, yeah.
A little more sustainable,
perhaps. A little more sustainable,
perhaps,
yeah.
Kind of leads into the next question, and that is, what is your definition of economic diversity, and how do you see that unfolding in Valemount, and is it a beneficial approach? You kind of half answered it already.
My definition of economic diversity is having varying sectors, not all tourism, not all forestry, not all like heavy industry. Let's have food security. Let's have, you know, it'd be wonderful to have some form of a greenhouse operation. We're in the north, it might be difficult, but I'd love that. Again, we have the forestry, we have our small specialty mills, we have the stone company, we have the brewery. Having a real mixture that way, instead of, you know, we can't just focus on just one industry like tourism. We can't survive just on that. And so the more specialized industries is what I would say is more of a diverse economy.
And it's hard for locals who may not have the type of wages or income to start up businesses like that. So it means attracting people to our community. We have, anytime someone goes to a community in terms of living or working, they want to know about quality of life. And so you look at what Valemount has to offer. So we have a small town feel, we have a wonderful community vibe, we have incredible scenery, that goes without saying. The climate is decent most of the time here. It's not bitterly cold and it's not terribly hot. We have a number of small operations there. We have the Valemount Bike Park for recreation. You know, we have all kinds of hiking and Kinbasket Lake for water sport recreation and that kind of thing. We have all these things that will attract people from a quality of life point of view. You look at what communities, towns, and villages like Nelson have done, right? They've created this we're an arts hub kind of thing, you know? And to the point where they exclude chain stores in the community because they want it to be a kind of a mom and pop sort of operation kind of thing, to keep that, you know, hometown grown kind of feel, right? What was the other one I was going to mention? Kimberly, right? They've created themselves as a, you know, kind of a Bavarian sort of city in the mountains sort of thing. Maybe it's time for Valemount to start thinking about, how do we package ourselves better, right? We have all these assets, we really do. People, you know, you talk to people, new people all the time, and it's like, I can't believe you guys live here. This is incredible. And then, well, up the road, excuse me, Mount Robson. Right? Yeah. 20 minutes, 30 minutes up the road is Mount Robson, one of the great, you know, wonders. The Fraser River runs near us here, kind of thing. So we have all these things. Maybe we're just not doing a good enough job of creating an image for Valemount that we can market, right? Or maybe it's partly we don't want to, right? I don't know. There's some elements of people in town who say, you know, you do that and you kind of wreck your small town feel, right? If you get too many people in here. So it's kind of a, how much growth is too much growth? Right?
Exactly. It's a fine balance, and that's where, you know, you have to listen to your citizens, but you also have to be able to grow somewhat. You have to, in order to, I mean, community is resilient. There are people that have been here through so many tough times, you know, so Valemount will always, as far as I'm concerned, exist in one way, shape, or form. And when you say about marketing ourselves, I think we've really been doing a good job working on that with the facade program from the Northern Development Initiative Trust. Look at the wonderful improvement projects that have been happening with our local businesses. So I think we're in the process of working towards that visual package. And we have done a lot of marketing with Tourism Valemount. We have Varda that's doing tremendous marketing for our region. And then there's the Robson Valley Region Marketing Initiative as well, that's been doing a lot of, you know, really good work marketing our region, our valley. So I think we're, you know, it's not that we're not working on that, we are, and we're just getting the package together and ready to go present to the world. And I think when and if Valemount Glacier Destination does finally happen, then we will be having the world on our doorstep, you know, and I know that is a huge concern for a lot of citizens. And so that's where we really need to make sure to listen to their concerns and see what we can do to help alleviate those concerns.
You and I talk to people from out of town all the time when we're in our travels, and you say to people, or they say to you, where do you live? And you say, Valemount. They go, oh, I know Valemount. I say, how do you know Valemount? Well, I stopped there on my way to Edmonton, to Vancouver, to wherever else, right? I said, what do you think of the town? Well, I've never been in the town, right? It's like, okay, we're going to have a shuttle bus service right at the corner of Caras and 5th. Take people into town and show them what we've got. Right?
Well, and for sure, that does happen. And that's where then when I'm in that conversation, I'm like, well, you know what? That's too bad, because you know what? There's a lot of great things that you missed out on if you didn't go into town. You know, like there is way more to our town off the highway, and you missed some really unique and interesting shops. I think we've had some of our interesting and unique shops that have been helping draw the traffic off the highway.
Like the Swiss Bakery.
Like the Swiss Bakery.
Right, that's quite a drawback there.
That people like come for the Swiss Bakery and the brewery and the Gathering Tree. You know, I know people were thinking, oh, you know, what's going to happen to the Gathering Tree when, you know, some of the chains opened on the highway. You know what? You're still going to want to go to the Gathering Tree because they make a unique product there that you don't get at the chain stores.
And they make that place welcoming and inviting for you to sit there and relax and enjoy, whereas chain stores are about getting in and out, right?
So, they're push the cattle through.
Right.
Yeah, and the other thing too is with my work with the Trans-Canada Yellowhead Highway Association, by having that AGM here in 2014, a lot of those people that were here for that got to know our community that much better, and now when they are coming through, they don't just pass through. They now are making Valemount a part of their stop. They are visiting our museum. They are, and I know this for a fact because they've told me. So just that, having that one AGM here, because that was, I know, a question people said, how is that going to benefit Valemount? Well, you know what, it's had its small spin-offs, and it'll continue, because now these people have family members that are they're telling them about, or they're like, where was that? And they're like, oh, well, that was like Valemount, or oh, that was Tijon at the Riverside Cafe, you know. So it's just, it takes that word of mouth, right? And the word is getting around. Valemount is getting known. You know, it's.
I had a very similar experience. I was just sitting here while you were talking, thinking about it. And I was in Revelstoke in the summer at a conference, a housing conference. And I had always done the same thing that everybody does in Revelstoke. Stay on the highway in one of the strip motels there or whatever, and eat there, and then get in the car and go. Well, the conference was in downtown Revelstoke, and I went in there and I was, wow, what a great little community, right? Yeah. It's wonderful, and they've got a whole entry facade with these giant carved grizzly bears and things, and in brickwork and in statues and things. But then they've also, as you said, fixed up the facades of the old buildings and tried to keep them as historic and authentic as possible. And I'm like, this is really kind of cool, and I knew nothing about it. Nobody had ever told me anything about it, and now next time for sure, I'm not going anywhere near the strip. I'm going to go into town and walk along the river and do all those kinds of things.
Yeah, it's lovely. I know. I've done that there, walked the streets in the downtown area, and it's such a unique and wonderful little community. So that's where, as well, the fabulous work of some of our other organizations as well, at VARDA, like the work that they've done with sledding in the winter and the bike trails. The bike trail system is amazing. Now, I haven't personally been up there. I'm getting a little old and I have bad knees, but I still think I might try and go up there and hopefully not injure myself seriously. But the word is out about that park. There are people that are coming from other communities specifically because they've heard about the bike park. And so the bike park also is drawing people through town. How do you get to the bike park? You have to go right through town to get to it, right? So it's, again, just continuing to have all these different organizations working together, supporting and selling our community, and still keeping it the small town feel like we have for those of us that live here. And I think it's the people that I have seen that come to visit to enjoy the bike park. They seem to be a lot of what I've seen have been, they're like small town people too. You know, they're coming from Revelstoke, they're coming from Jasper to do these things. So they know what it's like, and it just, some of the photos I've seen of people enjoying the park, and then they're going and having a beer at the brewery afterwards, and it just seems like such a great...
And a meal at the Funky Goat next to that.
A meal at the Funky Goat. Love our food truck, right? That was one of the things. It was so nice being able to make that happen for the Funky Goat, right? You know, that was
quite unique, because that was the first for Valemount, and it took a lot of, as I remember, a lot of hand wringing and how are we going to make this work?
How are we going to make it work? But you know what? It wasn't. No, it was like, let's find a way, because you know what? This is a great idea, and he's so popular. He's become well known all over the place too. So it's that how can we make things work? Let's not just say no, but let's say, let's see if we can make this work. Let's give it a try, and a can do, not a no. attitude.
Okay, great. Well, on that positive note, let's move on to perhaps a little less positive topic, and that's air quality. According to the BC Lung Association's State of the Air report for 2017, Valemount had the worst measured air quality in all of BC in 2016, which is the most current data that's available, with nearly double the provincial average objective for PM 2.5 emissions, exceeding the provincial baseline of 25 micrograms per cubic meter on 72 of 365 days. So that's nearly 1 in 5 days we were above the maximum pollution level recommended by the province of BC. And in that year, unlike this year where we were shrouded in forest fire smoke, and last year as well, there were no wildfire smoke advisories issued. So this is pretty much all to do with our own wood smoke here in the wintertime, perhaps some of the silica dust in the summertime as well. The question is, do you have a plan for addressing this important health concern of poor air quality in Valemount? And if so, could you provide some specific actions you might recommend to help alleviate the situation?
You know, air quality is such a tough one, because you know what? It doesn't know boundaries and it doesn't know borders. So you can't control environmental issues that are coming in from outside of your boundaries. Right. But there are things that we could do, and one of the big things we definitely need is to have our own environmental air indexing system here. So we know that what the air index is here, right in Valemount, not a number we're getting from McBride.
Right, currently, right?
Right?
Yeah.
Because these are two very different valleys. They're in the Robson Valley, we're in the Canoe Valley, part of the Rocky Mountain Trench. And our inversions here are much different. And so we need to have the data, we need to have the equipment for right here. So that's definitely something I want to work on, making sure we have that. I'd like to see re-implementation, and I know it had been discussed, but I haven't seen a lot happen. Now we have had staffing changes, which is always a challenge, right? Because you start to get a project rolling and then staff changes and it gets halted.
I have another question for you about that later.
You're hitting me with all the hard ones.
Well, I'm hitting you with all the ones you know that are issues. So,
so I'd like to see a committee struck to really address those issues and work with environment, Ministry of Environment. We have a contact that wants to work with us and help us best as possible. Valemount, again, this is a very sensitive topic because we're talking about wood smoke, and wood burning is affordable, right? We have a community that is a mixture of income levels, and a lot of the income levels are those that are below, you know, being able to afford paying for propane and electric heat, and they're needing to, and especially with electric heat the way it is. And that's something that, you know, is one of my passions.
The two-tier hydro rates,
yeah, it's one of those things that I think is very unfair for those of us in the north, and especially in communities that don't have a whole lot of other options. So we need to find a way to address that. It's learning to burn smart as well. And it's, you know, there's been a problem with people that, I'm sorry to say it, are burning garbage. A lot of people don't realize that, and it's horrifying. And we need to make sure to let people know that that's not okay, because that is, you know, polluting the air terribly as well. It's the wood stove exchange program is only as good as what people can afford as well.
Right. And it doesn't go far enough.
It doesn't go far enough.
Not with the price of stoves these days.
No. Yeah. So it's a really tough one, and it's so many people in our community suffer from the air quality. Seniors and young children expectant mothers, those are the ones that are most negatively impacted by poor air quality.
I can think of at least 3 interviews I've done with candidates so far. We're nearing the end of the candidate interviews, that the candidates themselves or their family members have developed asthma since they've been here. And they attribute that to the poor air quality. Not just the wood smoke, but also the sand and the dust from tin basket as well.
Yeah,
right?
for sure. I know. I know that I have, you know, different issues at different times of the year as well. And when air quality is affecting me, it affects me in different ways as well, and that's where it triggers headaches and that in me. So I've gone, you know, days, weeks on end with headaches when we've had bad air quality, you know, and still have to function and work with that. But that's, we all have to try and function and live with that. There, you know, and then there is the issue, and this is one that a lot of people, and again, it's tough because we can't tell people. We can't come right out and say you can't use this to heat your home, but with existing homes. But what we could do is with future construction, say what they could or couldn't do as far as heating sources. I believe that is in the codes, if I'm not mistaken, that they must have, if they do new builds, it has to be catalytic converters, stoves. Yeah. But we can also put other limitations on as well. There are a few in town that have the wood boilers. Right. And those are very bad.
Well, it's like multiple wood stoves in one, right?
They burn long pieces of wood, quite often not dry wood, green wood, and they are some of the biggest offenders of contributing to the poor air quality. So that is one of those, like I said, can be a very sensitive and tough choice to make, to say no more of those. Right. I know of other communities that have banned them, that they are no longer available. So like I said, though, it's an affordable alternative for some people. So that's where you don't want to say no, because you don't want to deter development or construction, but you also have to look out for their quality for the rest of your citizens, right? So it's going to take, I think, a lot of work looking at alternatives, working with the Ministry of Environment, and seeing what else is out there as far as different sources to help do any conversions we can, to help people that can't afford it, and listen to the public as well and see.
It's, you know, I think it's to the point, and it's a personal thing for me, and I know it is for a lot of people as well, in that we have this problem, but we don't seem to be dealing with it. And we're all cognizant of the fact that people burn wood because it is an economic alternative, right? And nobody's saying we're going to march into people's homes and take away their wood stoves, right? Nobody wants that either. But what we do want is to be able to make some headroad here, or some inroads into this. And what some communities are doing is they'll start what's called an airshed society or an airshed committee. And that is kind of an overarching group that looks at what all alternatives could possibly help, right? So the wood stove exchange program, it's still in operation. BC Lung Association and Regional District are involved with that, but it is still quite low.
It is still quite low.
You know, maybe a creative thought, and I mentioned this to one of the other candidates as well, is, and Mayor Townsend's always talking about this as well, is when people are applying for CBT Community Initiatives funds, they never go to that fourth pillar of CBT, and that's environmental. Right? So perhaps if an airshed society was formed, they could create, you know, they could try to apply for a pool of funds that would match whatever the Lung Association and the Regional District are going. So maybe if it's 10% or 15%, now it's 30%. And maybe you could find one more, maybe NDIT or a not NDIT, Northern Health, or someone else could be involved and top it up to 50%. So now you're talking about 50% is something I think that will get people's attention at least, because you know, the stove is old and it's not that efficient. The older it is, probably the less efficient particular stove is. So it's not just a question of cleaner burning, it's more efficient burning and more warmth for your home, right? With less wood, perhaps, right?
Oh, for sure.
Or pellets,
right?
Pellets are much more efficient and offer way less emissions in terms of wood.
And a really nice,
but the education side is important as well. If you're going to do wood, do dry seasoned wood, right? Burn it hot. Don't have, you know, these kinds of things. So I think it's time, and people are really, what can we do? Not just what can't we do. What can we do? Right? And get moving on this thing, because it's not getting any better.
No,
and nobody wants us to be stuck with this worst air quality in BC thing. Right? We don't even have a mill here. We have the worst air quality in BC, right?
And you don't want to. You don't want. I lost my train of thought there. I'm sorry. You don't want to keep saying. Like I said, no, and I think if we can have a air quality, like you said, commission or committee formed to start working on these things, and the whole education, there's my thought, the whole education component, again, you can only educate people as much as they want to be educated, right? I think a good example was, we had that example out of the efficient and inefficient stoves burning, and there wasn't a very large turnout of people there.
Where they did the workshop here.
Where they did the workshop here.
Right.
Thank you, VCTV, for being there and recording it and getting it out to educate the people that weren't there. That's where you are a huge value to our community, because you've become a big tool to help everyone educate and get the word out to everyone.
Well, we're also busy. We can't get to a lot of these things, right? So it's important. And you know, knowing how to burn is and I think it's probably insulting to some people, because you know, I've been burning wood for 50 years and some upstart guy is going to come and tell me how to burn my wood, right? However, there are people who don't really, you know, they'll throw in a full log and say, why isn't this, you know, why is there smoke pouring up my chimney here,
why
right?
isn't it burning? And you know, just knowing how to properly use the stove as well, you know.
So anyway, I don't want to belabor this topic too much, but it sounds like you have put some thought into it and are willing to help to move it forward in terms of what we can do to improve it.
For sure, because I do not want to keep seeing us being the worst air quality. No.
And you know, we probably all had that experience of driving home, coming down Highway 5 and seeing Valemount at night with this giant cloud of yellowy smoke hanging over top of it, and you just look at it and go, oh my.
Well, and in the morning, you know, when the cold air is keeping it all, you know, I come in to go to work and it's like, oh, okay, it's going to be a rough breathing day today, you know, until the sky's clear and the air index improves and it, you know, disperses. So.
Right. Would the village consider giant fans?
Oh, that would be interesting.
Not in our backyard. We're going to send it to, I don't know, wherever, down the lake again.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to our fourth topic, which is on leadership, communications, transparency. The position of mayor, I don't need to tell you, requires numerous skills. Being a team builder, being a leader, being an effective communicator, being able to take the concerns of Valemount residents to other levels of government, sometimes forcefully when they don't really want to hear what you have to say. You just had that experience at UBCM with BC Hydro, and they don't really want to hear what you have to say.
No, they don't.
and also the willingness to listen and to respond to the concerns of Valemount residents in an open and a fair and in a transparent manner. So we have two kind of subtopics on this. The first one is on Chief Administrative Officer, and we briefly breached this earlier. It's an important position. For those that don't know, that the CAO is responsible for managing the affairs of the village. In the old days, it would be called town manager, right? Yeah. Managing the affairs of the village, plus managing all of the staff. And they are the one employee of council, right? They report and liaise directly with council to staff to make it work. So it's a hugely important, it's the most key position in municipal government, right? Yeah. Over the past 4 years, as you're, I'm sure, very, very much aware, we've had 7 either CAOs or interim CAOs come and go for various reasons, resulting in hiring costs, resulting in termination costs, resulting in studies that being done. And and those costs obviously come from the taxpayer, are paid by the taxpayer, as well as instability in village operations, as you mentioned earlier, right? Every time you have somebody that comes on, it takes them a while to get up to speed with it and to understand how our system works here. They start up a project and then they're gone, and there's no legacy for that project. There's no one to carry the thing. So if you're elected mayor, what would you do to try to avoid this constant turnover we have in the most key senior position in Valemount government here?
You know, it's become actually a problem countrywide, where we have CAOs, town managers, just moving around all over the place. So one of the keys is hopefully making it be as attractive and appealing for them to want to stay and be here. One of the big issues we've heard from some of the people that have either applied or have been here has been the housing issue.
Right.
So we need to get that addressed because the village itself has suffered from the lack of affordable housing for even its own staff. The relationship between mayor and council and the CAO has to be an open and respectful relationship, and I'm not saying that it hasn't been. But that individual is like the center of the hourglass, right? So council have to work with that individual. They give the direction to that individual, and they have to respect that that individual is going to relay that to the rest of the staff. And it's always very important that council don't overstep that and go beyond without the okay of the CAO to other staff. And there's going to be times where a council member has to work with other staff members, especially if they're working on a committee with that staff member. So there are some exceptions. I think one of the biggest keys is just having a good, solid, respectful, and open relationship with the CAO and working as a team. But you know what, you can do as much as you can. You can't control what may be affecting a CAO's personal life, their family life, or whatever. So, you know, one of the big things would be to have somebody that's going to bring their family. If their family's not here with them, sometimes that can be a challenge to keep them, right? You know, and you can't deny somebody that. So, you know, short of chaining them to their office, I can't say how we could possibly guarantee keeping someone for a full term, but that would be my goal, to have somebody want to be here and love to be here and want to stay long term. Now long term, unfortunately, sounds like in the CAO world has become 5 to 10 years, unfortunately. It doesn't sound like there's any more of this staying in one place for 15, 20 years, so that's really unfortunate. Well,
I think part of small town life is a lot of people use it as a stepping stone.
Yes.
Right? So maybe they were a corporate officer in a previous life or another administrative position. They come, they use this as the background for a resume for a larger center, right?
Yes.
And I think that's a realistic thing. I mean, we're a small community. We can't probably afford to pay the salaries that some other larger communities can pay.
Right. So that's...
But there are things that can be done in terms of, let's say Jasper, for example, which is a little bit different, but the idea is the same, and that is if there's a shortage of housing, maybe the village considers purchasing a house, right?
Funny you should mention that.
Exclusively for that position, and if that person wants to buy their own home, they can, and then they can rent it out, whatever. So they have, you know, eliminated one of those barriers, perhaps.
Yeah,
right?
It is so funny that you mentioned that, because that is one of the topics I myself and I believe a couple of us other on council had raised, saying this is something we might need to consider doing, where the village might have to consider some employee housing for the CAO position.
You know, it's a benefit in terms of not that you're providing the house for free. I mean, they can rent it, whatever else, but it takes that stumbling block away, and nobody wants that. You don't want to be living in a suite in somebody's house and commuting back and forth for 4 hours to get to your family on the weekends. It's very hard, and it's hard to stay focused when you want to do that. Right?
It is, yeah, because we've had some very good people here that I'm sad that we lost. Right. You know, so.
Yeah. Absolutely, and that's what you need here in a town that's in a village that's in transition, like we constantly are. It seems. Yeah. You want somebody who can be able to, you know, bring that creative energy, bring some plans to the table, and see them through to fruition, and make it work. Because, as you say, you know, you have a finance officer, you have someone else, and they have their own work to do. They're not able to spearhead a project and to take it through the process.
Exactly, right? And you know, the rest of the staff at the village have been amazing. You know, this has been a challenging term. There have been a lot of, like you said, 7. They're interim or...
Well, some of them have been twice.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, you know, that's a lot in a 4-year term. And so the other senior staff have had to carry a lot of the load. You know, they've had their normal duties, but then they've also had on unfortunately, the side of their desk, which can't really be the side of the desk because they have to address these things. They've had to carry the load of CAO as well. Right, so it's definitely been a challenge.
It takes away from their work as well. It takes away
from their work. And like I said, that's where it gets to the point of, are we getting anything done, right? And that's where there were so many different things that had kind of gotten started, but they've gotten stalled because they haven't been a priority, and we haven't had that consistency of one individual over the 4 years, right? So
I mean, you're still in the process right now, looking for a new CAO. What, other than the things we talked about, is there anything important in the hiring process that you feel could be improved upon with the new council? I
know. You know, the village has had to try to be competitive, like you said, as far as the wages. So that's, you know, there has been a lot of work done to make sure that we are still competitive with, you know, other communities out there, but not at the total expense of breaking the bank with the taxpayers. And we need to make sure that whoever comes on is going to be chosen by the new council, so that they know, you know, they've had their say, they've had their input into somebody that they feel they can work with. And, you know, there are certain criteria that, you know, we look for, you know, experience and knowledge and that, but we are also open to looking at people that don't always have everything, you know, and Adam Davey was a prime example. He didn't have all the certain criteria that we were looking for, but he, you know, had that ambition and there was that something about him that we had a really good feeling about, and we thought, you know, let's give him a try. Right. And you know, he was one of those, wow, glad we did that, you know, because he was really good, you know. Right. So sometimes you don't always know, and sometimes you take a chance on an individual. And like you said, though, it's always hard because we know, being a small village, that's one thing that unfortunately council are going to have to keep in mind, is that we might be that stepping stone. So that is where it can be frustrating and maddening, but it makes it, I guess, a little bit easier if you go in knowing that. Yeah.
And it's definitely a clean slate this time. You have a new mayor, basically almost an entire new council, and you have a new CAO, all coming in at almost the same time, right?
Yeah, that's a challenge. You know, you really need to have some continuity. So I'm hoping.
So vote for me.
So vote for me. Yeah, you really need to have some continuity. You know, there had pretty much been a clean slate done in 2011. One thing is that I had my administrative background before. Right.
But it's those, you know, 2 years of the term are basically a learning curve.
Learning curve, especially for anyone that doesn't have any previous experience. It's for sure the first year is just trying to, you know, get your feet on the ground and understanding things, and then the second year, okay, maybe we can start doing things. So that's where Changing to the 4-year term has been a big adjustment, and I know it's been a deterrent for a lot of people, and I sometimes don't like the 4-year term, but at the same time, it does at least give, especially when you have all new people or people
Right.
that are new to it, gives them a better opportunity and chance to actually see some things through in 4 years. Because like you said, the first two years are going to be just getting them up to speed. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the second part of this question. This deals with your leadership and communication style. So how would you describe your leadership style? And what do you plan to do if elected to effectively lead and build a strong teamwork with the new council?
Can you repeat that again? Sorry.
Sure. What would you say, how would you describe your personal leadership style? And what would you plan to do if elected to effectively lead and build a strong team with the new council?
Okay. I'd say my leadership style is more along the lines of working alongside. I don't believe in being above everyone else and ordering. I'm like, okay, we have a project, we need to do this. Let's put our heads down and work together and see, get it done, see what we can accomplish, see what ideas people bring to the table, and come to a conclusion together, a solution that we can move forward on. What I really would want to be doing too is making sure that my council are informed as far as knowing what's going on. Making sure that they know that, okay, so-and-so has contacted me wanting to meet about this, or wanting to have a telephone conversation on this. There's certain things that, yes, the mayor isn't always going to share with their council, but I think it's really important to make sure to keep that line of communication and information open with your whole council so that they feel as much engaged in as part of the team and not just sometimes left in the dark and not knowing what's happening. So for me, it would be making sure that I don't put any of my council in a position of being approached on the street, asked a question, saying, well, did you know this, blah, 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 and them going, I don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
There's nothing worse than being blindsided. And I'd like to say that there would need to be more transparency too, because I know that there are times that the public are wondering what's going on. And I know my first term we really tried to improve the communication with the community and improve transparency, but I think there still is more that can be done.
Strangely enough, I have a question for you about that. Okay, did you have anything else to add, or can I move on? All right, so the next question actually is regarding communications. So during this council's term, current term, no formal communications policy has been developed. The town hall / community conversation meetings have been stopped. One of the media outlets in Valemount, it's not VCTV, has had trouble getting information from the current mayor in terms of what's happening. And council doesn't seem as a whole to have made it any easier for people to communicate and engage in the process. For example, and I think I've mentioned this to you in the past, and it's one of my pet peeves, and it's getting on the council agenda. So if you want to speak on the council agenda, you get your delegation request in by Thursday at noon. However, the agenda doesn't come out till Friday afternoon. So you're not certain what topics are going to be on the agenda. If it's a long-running topic for the past 3 meetings or something, are they going to be voting on it at this meeting? Or do you know? You have no idea because you don't see.
Yeah.
It's a small thing, but it's a thing, right? And it kind of it deters you from even wanting to be involved because you don't. It's like, am I wasting my time here? It's not set to succeed, and I don't believe it's done intentionally. I just believe that it's done from a logistical point of view, as that got to get the packages out to council for the next meeting, and we have to have this deadline, etc. But it doesn't encourage the public to want to be involved with that. Another thing is the public comments. So people go to the council meetings. For those that don't know, there's a public comment section at the very end of every council meeting, and people are allowed up to 2 minutes to speak to something that has been on the agenda of that meeting. So you can't talk to something from another meeting. You have to limit your conversation to that.
Right.
However, if council has already voted on something, really it's just you're saying, great job, thank you for doing that, or bad job, why did you do that, right?
Yeah.
And your input is, I mean, of course it's valid and it's valued by council, but it doesn't really affect anything, right? So some communities like McBride, for example, put their public comments right at the top of the meeting, right? 4 items only that are on the agenda, right?
Right.
So that when you come up to whatever item it is you're going to be debating, you may have gleaned some additional information that you didn't know from that person, right?
Yeah.
And I understand you can't have 20 people standing up and talking for 5 minutes.
Right,
Your council meetings would go on forever.
Right.
However, you could do what you do at the end of the meeting, just earlier in the meeting, right? It's no more time.
Almost similar along the lines of a public hearing.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's just a couple of those little things about communication, in addition to the town hall community conversations thing and the way that information is flowing both ways. So if elected, what would you do as mayor to try to improve the communication between the mayor and council, between Valemount residents, Valemount media, and also how would you provide a more open, fair, and transparent process that will engage people rather than deter them from participating? Because frankly, some people I've talked to just don't go because they don't feel they're being heard.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well,
long question.
I'll start from the kind of the top, communicating down with my council. I had already kind of touched on that.
Yes, a little bit, yeah.
I know previous term, former Mayor Smith's term, there had been a resolution passed that all communication to the mayor be forwarded on to the rest of council, and anything that could be put on the agenda to be included on the agenda. So then everybody knew what all was going to the mayor, and so it can be labor intensive in that, do you want to have your agenda so massive with how many pieces of correspondence? So I know that that's where some, in the 2011 term, somehow, whether it was staff or mayor of the day, said, no, we're not going to do that. I would like to make sure that that information still gets out there. So it could be part of the reading file, right? Where it doesn't have to be discussed and debated. It can just be a part of the reading file. If anyone wants to pull it forward, they can. So I'd like to have more of that communication, because then at least that council in 2008 to 2011 knew a lot more about what was happening, what was going on. They knew what the mayor was being invited to and not invited to. So that would be one1 of the first things I would do, is make sure that that is put back into place, Then communicating with the citizens, they're going to see that as well. Those that want to read the agendas, they're going to see more of that information. And I do like what you're saying about the comments, right? The public comments section, because that frustration has been relayed to me many a time as well. And like you said, we've had that conversation. So I think addressing our council procedure bylaw and amending it to better allow that kind of communication, so that, again, hearing feedback from the public on some of these things will help provide us with more information to make even better informed decisions, right?
And that's what it's all about,
And that's what it's about. Right. So, because I know there have been times where, yes, decisions have been made and there was probably information that maybe would not have changed the decision, but it would have had more debate and discussion and information to make sure that you are still really comfortable with the decision you're making. Right. I think there may have been maybe some times where a decision might have been different if we had known some
Councillor Blanchette mentioned that as well. I wish I had known that before we had voted, right?
Yeah, because there have been times where, you know what, I think maybe we did make a mistake and feel horrible about it. And it's hard to change it. There is a process that can be done to change it, but it's not always an easy process.
Right. As a member of the public, it doesn't the public comments, the way it's structured now, almost feels adversarial. And I don't think that's the intent of it, and I don't think that's helpful for anybody, right?
No.
You want to use it as an information gathering tool. Of course, you're going to have some people who stand up and say things that are uncomfortable or maybe off topic or whatever else. And it's up to the mayor as the chair to keep that under wraps. But there are going to be those times when it makes a real difference, right?
And I mean, there had been a time where there weren't public comments whatsoever on the Village of Valemount Council agenda as part of the procedure. So at least we have that. But now, you know what, we've tried it this way for a while. Let's see if we can't maybe change it and do it a different way. That's going to be more effective and more transparent and open for the public to feel heard as well.
Okay, great. I'm going to move on there because we're running a little bit long.
I'm getting long-winded.
No, that's okay. The topics have been kind of meaty, and this one is no exception, and it's conflict of interest. On May the 26th of 2015, during this current council term, village staff presented Policy 64 to council, which was an enhanced local conflict of interest policy for councils as recommended by BC Solicitor General. The Local Government Management Association of BC and the Union of BC Municipalities believe that enhanced clarifications of conflict of interest guidelines may be needed based on the BC Court of Appeals Schlenker decision, which was a case in Salt Spring Island with 2 councillors that were found to be in conflict of interest. So they've created a number of considerations for staff and for elected officials to help them determine when elected officials may be in conflict of interest. And some of those run contrary to what's in the community charter. Policy 64, as you probably will remember, was adopted by a 3-2 vote with Councillor Reimer and Mayor Townsend opposing. Approximately 6 months later, on January the 12th, that policy was rescinded by a 3-1 vote with only yourself opposing, with the recommendation that the conflict of interest guidelines outlined in the community charter under Part 4, Division 6 be used as they had been in the past. So the question is, do you believe that conflict of interest guidelines stronger than those found in the community charter are necessary? And if so, would you support once again putting forward a locally tailored set of conflict of interest guidelines and definitions? I told you it was meaty.
Well, I think I've been quite clear as to where I stand on that. As my experience as corporate officer, there were a number of occasions that the Local Government Act isn't always black and white. And sometimes those gray areas are open to interpretation, which can, if interpreted wrong, get you in some trouble. So I felt quite strongly about having this enhanced policy in place to help guide and protect council. And I do feel it is necessary. That being said, in small communities, it is so difficult to not be in a conflict in one way or another. Now, the difference is between perceived conflict and pecuniary, and there's varying levels of pecuniary as well, right? So, and that's where the policy that we had kind of helped guide and instruct people as to, you know, is this a conflict or not? You know, is this a perceived conflict or not? Is it a pecuniary? And it's the pecuniary conflicts that are the most critical ones, right? So, and
most people understand the obvious ones.
It's
money,
ones.
Right? If somebody, if you're benefiting or your family's benefiting from it, that's an obvious one. That it's those other shoulder areas, those gray areas.
Those gray areas that can be challenging.
Right.
So yes, if I get in as mayor, I would like to see an enhanced policy in place along those guides to clarify the guidelines of conflict of interest. Okay,
I read some of the legal opinions that came out after that ruling, and they were talking about it's so difficult now that, as we said, if it's a monetary issue, that's obvious. But if it was if you're a director of a society or an executive member of a society, of course that's a conflict as well. Now they're saying even if you're a member of a society, you could be in conflict because the member is there to elect the board, to elect the directors, and is there to promote the interests of the society. So, you know, in the old days it was, yeah, you can vote on that, you're just a member, you're not a director, right?
Right.
Now they're saying maybe not.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. So,
yeah.
you know, it's, I think they're saying err on the side of caution,
yeah.
be uber cautious about this.
Yeah, and you know, I know some people have, you know, I've heard remarks that some people think, oh, well, you know, you're just trying to avoid a difficult discussion. Well, no, not necessarily. You know, it's I'm erring on the side of caution, and you know, yes, you know, I've removed myself for perceived conflict because I felt it was a perceived conflict. I didn't want people to look at me going, oh, well, you know, she's making a decision on this, and well, gee, you know, doesn't she work for this organization that's connected with this? And you know, so it's better to remove yourself than not.
Right.
I guess you have to just pay attention to if it's going to be a point in a small community where there are so many connections,
well, that's
that all of a sudden, gee, you're left without a quorum.
Yeah, I'm just thinking at some point or another in my term of taping all the council meetings, I'm going to come to a time where everybody recuses themselves and there's nobody to vote.
Exactly.
You know,
so that's where then, yeah, you know, you have to be within reason. Right. But there have been times where I would say that I felt that there should have been some people recusing themselves, but they haven't.
Right.
And so that's that perceived conflict.
Right. So we get back to that point, and you do support the stronger ones, obviously, because you voted for them to begin with. I just wanted to make sure you were still on the same page there.
I'm still on the same page there.
Let's move on.
I can be a tough nut sometimes.
Let's move on to another topic that has created some controversy in the community, and that's Rainbow Crosswalk and inclusivity and according to Vancouver's Georgia Straight newspaper, as of June the 11th of this year, there are now 42 rainbow crosswalks throughout BC. On July 26, 2016, as you'll remember, this current council voted against installing a rainbow crosswalk here, citing cost and safety concerns. Prince George, we did our research, Prince George installed one at a budgeted cost of $6,000, but that is a four crosswalk corner to corner kind of thing, using a cold fusion process that makes it last apparently longer. Prince Rupert installed a traditional one for $1,850. As you'll remember, the proponents of that project volunteered to pay for the paint, or raise the money to pay for the paint and do the work themselves, and even do the maintenance work themselves. But for whatever reason, perhaps liability or other issues, that was not considered, or it was rejected. In terms of the safety side, a study done by the City of Edmonton on their 6 rainbow crosswalks that they had found that the rainbow crosswalks did not decrease pedestrian safety in any way. There were no accidents, there were no safety concerns. And our research here at VCTV shows that Valemount is now one of only 3 communities in BC that have voted against a rainbow crosswalk, Merritt and Campbell River being the other 2. There have been lots of communities where it hasn't come up, it hasn't been proposed, but in terms of voting against it. So the question for you then is, given that rainbow crosswalks are seen as a recognition that a community is considered LGBTQ2 plus friendly, if elected, would you support the installation of a rainbow crosswalk on a public street, not a particular one, but just on a public street in Valemount, and why or why not?
Okay. Well, I am in support of the LGBT. I'm sorry,
plus, yeah.
plus.
There's many many additions there.
You know, I grew up in the city. I grew up in Edmonton, so I've had friends that are members of that community since the 70s. So I am in no way opposed or against them. I have seen some of the crosswalks in other communities, and I don't like how, I like the rainbow. It's just I've seen the wear and tear that they go through in our northern communities where you're dealing with snow and snow removal and that.
And salt and sand.
And salt and sand. So I would be in support of some recognition, some form of recognition of rainbows in our community. but I don't want that really on the road, especially on our cobblestones. I would consider, and this is the last time around, I would have considered it in a different location, but the proponents then only wanted it right on Fifth Ave. They weren't willing to consider a different location.
So in terms of the cobblestone, is it just a maintenance issue for you? Is that why you wouldn't want it there?
It's, you know what, we paid a lot of money for those stones in the first place, and I think it'll be the maintenance on the stones would be that much more intensive than on just asphalt. Okay. And then there is still a liability issue when you're putting markings on a roadway. I believe that I've heard that there has been a crosswalk removed from one of the cities in BC because it has become a hazard. It has been a danger and has caused some problems. So that's where I would rather support a different form, whether it be a nice big mural on a building or some flags, or even maybe, you know, on a bench. I've seen some staircases painted. I've seen some sidewalks. Now again, we have our cobblestone sidewalks, but I would be open to a discussion and consultation and working. I know there is also, though, there are other people in the community that are, this is unfortunately one of those topics that has been very divisive in the community. Right. So what I may feel is one thing, but we have to consider the community as a whole as well. And I said the other evening, everyone has a right to feel safe and to be heard. So I know if any of the members of the LGBTQ2 community aren't feeling safe, I want to know about it, and I want to know what's happening to them in our community that's not making them feel safe, and see what we can do to address that. Maybe there is something else we can do. So I'm not outright opposed to showing rainbow support. I just still have an issue with it being on the roads.
Okay, fair enough. Let's move on to an equally challenging topic, cannabis. So as you know, recreational use of cannabis becomes legal in Canada on October the 17th, which is what's today? Less than 2 weeks away anyway. 2
weeks away, yes.
No one's really ready for it, I don't believe. It could have a potentially major impact here in Valemount and in all municipalities. Municipalities across Canada are struggling with what to do with it. I saw a piece on Global BC, and it listed I think 50 municipalities in BC, and every one of them had something different. Some of them were banning the sale outright. Some of them only wanted sales in retail outlets that were, you know, fully thought out and planned out. Some wanted them only in government stores, etc. So there's a wide range of things. So this is a two-part question for you. The first one's got 3 sections. So if elected as mayor, would you support and encourage entrepreneurs to start up marijuana retail outlets, licensed marijuana retail outlets in the community? Or would you support only sales through BC government cannabis stores? Or, the last or, are you in favor of banning the retail sale of marijuana in Valemount outright?
Well, you know, that's a tough one. And quite frankly, I don't think my own personal opinion is what matters. It's what the community wants. That being said, though, I think if we got feedback from the community, I know that there are benefits of the use of cannabis. I know that there are medical benefits. And I know there are going to be very strict controls on it as well. You know, some people have a misconception that it's just going to be a free-for-all, and it won't. And it's going to have its own challenges of, again, regulating it. And how do we, you know, enforce? That's a challenge. Like you said, there are communities everywhere that are having a problem. But you know what? If the community chose that they would be open to having a retail outlet here in Valemount, I would not oppose it. If they'd said that they absolutely don't want it, well, then I'm going to listen to my community and possibly say no. But I would like to, before saying yes or no, I would like to listen to each different application. I'd like to know what the application is. I'd like to know what their plan is, so that I can weigh and measure as well. And I think, you know, it would be, again, important to have input from the community. You know, so that's, for me, this isn't just a simple, what do I want? It's what does the community want?
Right. And so perhaps community consultation, like community conversations, town hall type?
Town hall, round table discussions, you know, just really getting down to, and I mean, those kind of things, community conversations, town halls, round tables, those all take a lot of staff resources and time, but you know what? It's one of those things that, you know what, we need to do that in order to listen to what our community wants.
Right, right. And my understanding is it's going to at least be handled in terms of licensing through the Liquor Control Branch, in a cannabis version of that.
Yes.
And they will have to apply for licensing, and there will have to be public consultation as part of that process. No different than there was for the Three Ranges Brewery when they decided to, you know, want to open a craft brewery and a tasting room kind of thing.
They had to go through a long process, a lengthy process. So it's...
And in fact, it could be, as we talked earlier, it could be an economic diversification thing. I mean, you could have a storefront where they sell it, but it also could do online sales as well.
Exactly.
Perhaps they have you know, an agricultural component outside of the community, right? That they're growing. So you know, it's as I've said to a couple of the other people I've interviewed, it's kind of hard for people that are our age to look at it. You know, it's been illegal all our lives, and now all of a sudden it's legal, and you may have those biases. Maybe you don't, you know, you never smoked it, or you don't like the whole idea, but you got to put aside that and say, but it's the law of the land, right? And how do we make it work, or do we as a community say no, right? And you know, there's a lot of people in Valemount, I'm sure, who would disagree with that approach as well.
Exactly, and you know, we just have to make sure that we protect everyone's rights. You know, we all have a right to clean air as well, and you know, we talk about air quality. Well, we don't want people fearing that they're not going to be able to leave their house because there's going to be people smoking, you know, cannabis all over the place in town,
well,
because some people actually have actual physical allergies to it.
Just like they do to cigarette smoke.
Exactly, right? And so, you know, everyone has their right to their space and to breathe.
Right. This question was about sales, but as a community, you have to look at usage as well. I mean, you can control usage in someone's home, but what are you going to do in a public park? What are you going to do on the streets? Is it going to be treated as it is with the liquor laws? You can't have a can of beer open walking down the street. You can't light a joint up and smoke it down the street. You can't be near a school, near a playground, those types of things to protect, you know, those people that need protecting in the community. Right?
And, you know, as far as the sales aspect of it, and that's why I'm saying, like, I would support it, having a retail location, because why wouldn't we want to have someone be able to have a business opportunity here in our community and have our local citizens be able to get it locally than having them to have to get it elsewhere, right?
And
the convenience.
I discussed this with someone else, and we talked about there's an opioid crisis in this country right now, and you don't know when you're buying marijuana on the street if it's been laced with fentanyl or carfentanil or whatever else. Whereas if you buy it in a regulated, licensed establishment, presumably there are controls in place for that type of thing.
Right. So you're again then taking your part, at least in protecting your citizens.
There's a kind of a second part to this question that was submitted, and is, what do you believe should be the laws on cannabis growing in Valemount proper? It's very unclear in the Act. It says I believe you can have up to 4 plants for personal consumption. You can't sell them, but they're for personal consumption. But it doesn't say whether they have to be indoors or outdoors, or if there's any kind of controls. Do you think that's an area that we need to be, as a village, considering?
Well, I know that there had been some work started previous council term as far as zoning for the production of cannabis. Now, whether
medicinal production at that time?
Yes, medicinal production. Thank you for correcting me on that. It was for medicinal production, and I'd have to look back, because I believe that bylaw hasn't gotten passed first and second reading, so I think it's been left in the
limbo right.
land. So I think what we would need to do is let's get that back on board and perhaps address the personal growth, right? Like you said, the 4 plants, and
right.
and perhaps make sure that we address how it's handled in zoning as well.
I don't know if it has the same concerns that I think maybe there was no clarification when this question was submitted, so I think, you know, are people thinking it's going to be like a grow-op where you have, you know, hundreds of plants and there's odors emanating from that, and there's safety issues and power issues and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
4 plants, I don't know whether they would have any odor or not, whether indoor or outdoor.
Right.
And
so,
certainly you wouldn't need the same kind of hydroponic setup for
And that's
growing.
where, you know what, I'm not an expert on that.
Right.
So I would need to, like, we would need to look into, like, what are the different factors that we need to address and look into.
And do
get,
we, right? Yeah. Because, I mean, you don't have any rules on the books for council, I'm sure, about people brewing their own beer at home or wine or something.
I'm sure we don't. Unless, I don't know, some of our old bylaws are pretty old, maybe there is, but I doubt it, right?
Yeah, so, unless it's commercial production, then you definitely
would,
right?
So, so yeah, we just, like I said, I'm not an expert on these things, and you know, trying to give an answer on the spot is, I'm sorry, but that's not realistic. You need to do your research. You need to consult with the experts, and that's how we base our bylaws and decisions,
not really
right?
Fair to come up with a whole program of legalization and then just dump it down the line and say you deal with it, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But that's what's been done.
That's what's been done.
Right.
Unfortunately.
And in 12 days or whatever it is,
it's. Guess what? We get to just deal with it.
Right. But, you know, we're good. We can do it.
Yeah.
All right. Last question that's been submitted is on traffic congestion, which is kind of hard to say in a small town, on parking issues. What are your thoughts regarding the traffic congestion and parking issues on Caras Drive? And I believe they're talking about that 5th Avenue corner with Tim Hortons and Petro and the highway on one side, and also the Main Street business area around the Swiss Bakery, with vehicles parking on both sides of the road, some half on the road, half off the road. Some, I watched one time as I was driving there, somebody back across 2 lanes of traffic to go the other way, right, from the Swiss parking, right?
Okay.
You know, we're a small town, people, you know, parking rules are for city folk, right? But it is creating a bit of an issue there for people. And what do you think could be done to alleviate those 2 areas of concern?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I know our bylaws have stipulated parking requirements based on seating and that for, you know, different businesses within the community. So it'd be interesting. I almost would like to review and make sure that the Swiss Bakery has in front of their building what is required for their seating, because maybe there is a deficiency there, and maybe we as the village could perhaps, you know, because there is already people parking, or maybe we need to, like, just extend a parking area on that other side of the street. And but yeah, I mean, how do you control, unless there's an officer, you know, and that's just it. The RCMP are the ones that monitor and enforce. They're
more likely to be in the Swiss Bakery than outside, you know, enjoying the Swiss Bakery, like everybody else is in the summertime.
Yeah. So, oh yes, for sure. I mean, I've recognized that area of congestion, and have, you know, I've become very cautious when I'm driving through there. I definitely slow down, because I mean, I've had people all of a sudden bolting out between vehicles, and I'm like, whoa, you know. So,
very busy in the summertime.
It is very busy. So, you know, just the fact that has been raised, you know, it's maybe a good thing that we need to do a little, like, have somebody sit and do you know, a staff member, whether we have a staff member that could do it, or if we need to consult with someone to say what can we do to improve this.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation because there's private property on both sides of it.
Exactly.
There's the railroad tracks and the Bigfoot Trail, so you can't really go that way. So unless you had an off-site parking lot, and nobody would do that. So
isn't it a great challenge to have? It's that the place is so popular that, you know, there's so much traffic congestion around there. I think, you know, that's a great...
They need a drive-through.
Great. There you go.
I'm not going to mention that to Sylvia. She wouldn't like that.
She wouldn't like that. And then, the you know, it's a real... how do we handle this for sure, the 5th Avenue and Caras Drive? Because, you know, any of those developments that have gone in have had to undergo traffic impact studies, and the projects couldn't have gone through without them passing a traffic impact study. So now it's like, okay, well, they passed those, they're built, and we definitely have an issue, and how are we going to address it?
I've had personal issues with that, and almost got smacked a couple of times in that area, because you have a perfect storm. You've got two sets of entryways coming off the highway for that, plus you have the Pine Road, so there's three coming from that direction. Yeah. Then you have Tim Hortons coming out of is that actually an extension of Caris? I don't know, but on that side anyway, coming out of Tim Hortons. You have Caris, you have the Petrocan exit, which is right like 5 feet away from the parking, from the stop sign there. And then you have Fifth Avenue coming out onto the highway. So you get all that at once, plus in the summertime you've got tour bus loads of people crossing the streets there to take pictures in front of the Valemount sign. And some days, and all the trucks, you know, all the semi-trailers that are parked, some of them right back to the end where you block visibility and other things. So it's, you know, it's, I understand what this person is saying, and it's an accident waiting to happen, you know.
Yeah,
and I don't know how they designed it that way, because it doesn't seem to be working.
You know, but even before, honestly, even before the Tim Hortons was there, even just with the Petrocana and the A&W and Caris Drive with all the semi-trucks parking, and then, like you say, in the peak winter season with all the sleds, trucks and trailers. It's been an issue even before, and how we haven't been able to fix it, and I mean, it's not going to be an easy fix or a cheap fix. It'll be expensive, and so that's where I think we might have to have a consultation with the Ministry of Transportation and find out, you know, what recommendations they have. I mean, because any of these things too would have had to pass through the Ministry of Transportation approval process.
Right.
And so they have been approved, but you know, I don't want it to come to the point of having a fatality before anything is done. Right.
My experience has been, so coming out of Tim Hortons and going down Caris Drive, you've got to inch out first of all, because you can't see past the Valemount sign with the traffic that's coming that way. And then you've got to look over your shoulder and see if somebody's turning off the highway onto Fifth Avenue, and you've got to look across to see if somebody's actually going to yield at the yield sign coming off Fifth Avenue, coming off the highway onto Fifth Avenue. And sometimes they don't come onto Fifth Avenue, they make the sharp turn right onto Caris Drive from there too. Sometimes they yield, sometimes they don't yield, sometimes the trucks yield, you know. It's kind of a scary thing, and I've been driving for 50 years just about, right? So it's,
So I mean, I know I saw that they've erected a sign at the SO about no trucks and trailers, so
which means more of them on the street.
More of them on the street, and then I've also seen some semi-trucks not parking in very strange positions in front of the Tims on Caris Drive. So again, that's, you know, I think consultation as well with the RCMP, because again, they're the ones that enforce traffic violations, and find out from them as well what they suggest what could be done.
Right. Maybe you know, maybe the discussion starts with Modi and goes from there, and say, look, take a look. You know, I'm happy as VCTV to take my camera out there and just set it up and do a time-lapse video. I actually thought about doing that this summer, and then I forgot about it again. But.
So I mean, I hear the concerns for sure, and like I said, I do not want to have it get to the point of having a fatality happen there before anything is done. But it's, again, like we say, it's not going to be a quick, easy fix. It's going to be, it would have to be something pretty major, and it could be fairly expensive. You know, when you're talking about tearing up roads and concrete and asphalt and redesigning it, it's not going to be a cheap fix. But like
when you've got one life at stake,
it's one life, worth it, right? Exactly. Yeah, one life is worth more than any of that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's a matter of knowing that is a concern and an issue, and starting the conversation, like you said, see what we can do.
You know, it's nice to have that problem, you know, rather than having no cars coming into town.
Exactly, but it's, it's definitely become a growing concern, and even though the way the design of the SO and Tim Hortons appeared like it was going to be fine and work with the way they designed their drive-through, You know, the drive-through isn't the issue, and that's what, you know, I think people were concerned that the drive-through was going to be the big issue and causing the problems. No, I don't think they designed that very well. That is not the issue. The issue is just the regular congestion.
Well, it's a very popular place, and you know that people are parking there on both sides of the street to try to get in there.
And you know, council have discussed, you know, having a semi truck trailer unit parking area. But, you know, we know that we've even just from the pilot project we've tried with the sled trucks and trailers with that vacant lot between the clinic and the Super 8. They're not going to. They don't want to do it. They don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they want to park close to wherever they want to get their stuff, run out, get it, and go back. And I mean, we've had time and time again too the issue of trucks parking on both sides at Caris in front of the now Valemount Vacation Inn, where they're not supposed to park on that east side, but
they do.
They do.
Yeah.
And you know, we only have, again, it's frustrating, and I hear everyone's concerns, but we have limited resources. We have limited RCMP, and yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the one question that we have that's been written for individual candidates. So this one is for you. So you have, I have 11 and a half years of combined experience. I think that's right, right? At the village, first as a senior staff person, as corporate officer, and now as a two-term councillor. You're now running to lead the village as mayor. Leadership requires an additional set of skills. Do you feel you have the leadership strength and skills required to take Valemount's issues to other levels of government, sometimes forcefully, as we talked about earlier, and also to lead and bring together a group of councillors with diverse opinions to move forward? Jesus, is a long question. to move forward to get things accomplished for Valemount, and please give an example of how you've led in that way that you could demonstrate for us.
Okay, I mean, yes. I mean, if you aren't given an opportunity, how are you going to know? And so that's why I started working on developing myself for the position of leading in the role of mayor by growing my involvement with the Trans-Canada Yellowhead Highway Association, by getting involved with other organizations that's worked with other levels of government, having to get our voice forward. And, you know, so I served a term as president and having to chair AGMs and meetings for a 4-province organization where we have members from member municipalities all along the Highway 16 and Highway 5 corridor. So I've done a lot of work with that organization. I'm past president, so I'm still on the executive and still working very hard. And we've really been developing really close relationships with the different provincial ministries in the different provinces for the transportation corridor, and have been advocating very strongly for our members. We're working on taking the association further and rebuilding it and re-strengthening it we've developed a PowerPoint presentation, and we're actually, with a very, very limited budget, trying to go back out and re-engage with communities that had pulled their membership over the years, and just representing the association to them, telling them, look, you know, even though you're not a member, we're still advocating and working very strongly and hard for you, and working with the provincial ministries. We're another voice that's speaking up for you, even though you're not a member, and working. So if I found that if I can be a part of an organization that's working with members from 4 different provinces with differing views, and we're all able to come together and work collaboratively and supportively for every one of us, I think that gives me some pretty strong qualities and experience.
Great.
To work with council.
Great example, to work with 4 people with differing viewpoints. You got your whip in your chair ready? Sometimes you'll need that.
Electric buzzers.
Electric buzzers, there we go. Well, thank you very much for answering the questions. was great to have your candor on that. We're going to give you the same opportunity that we're giving all the candidates, and that's up to 3 minutes to make a closing set of remarks. And again, you can do it to the camera over my shoulder, or you can speak to me. Begin when you're ready.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Gord, for giving us all this opportunity. I really appreciate it. You were fairly gentle on me and the people submitting questions, you know, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. I wish all of the people running in this campaign the best of luck. I thank them all for putting their name forward, because you know what, it's not easy. And you know, that first step of deciding to put your name forward is a huge step. So the fact that they've had the strength to do that shows that, you know, they've got some strength to take them through. So again, I wish to really thank all of them and wish them all the very best of luck. I hope, you know, we can't all get our seat. There's 11 of us vying for 5 seats, so you know, somebody's going to lose, and I just really hope it's not me. So I
really hope it's not me.
Really
I like
hope
that.
It's not me. So on that note, I really encourage everyone to get out and vote. Don't be complacent, thinking that your candidate, your chosen candidate's going to get in, you know, because, oh, well, they're just going to get in. There's not going to be an issue. I've seen people lose elections before because of that, and then people have been upset that they didn't get in, and I'm like, well, did you go out and vote? Well, no. Well, why not? Well, they were going to get in. So it's really important. Right. Exercise your right. Exercise your voice. Get out. Go to the polls and vote. This coming Wednesday is our advance poll. I'm
going to get to that.
Yeah. And on Saturday, October 20th. Right. And I hope, again, I'm not going to be bashful. I hope that people will consider casting their ballot for
4 words.
For myself.
Please vote for me.
Please vote for Sandy Salt.
Okay, that's 5 words. We'll go with that. Or that's 7 words, actually. For mayor. Great. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. You kind of stole some of my thunder there, because I was going to do to encourage people to make sure you get out and vote. As Sandy said, it's a right that people have fought for us to have, and it's important. In a small community like this, 1 or 2 votes can mean that difference, as you said, between getting your candidate elected and not, and you don't want that to happen here. So you have 2 opportunities. The full details are Wednesday, October the 10th, from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. is the advance voting day, and that will be at the Village Council Chambers at 735 Cranberry Lake Road. The general voting day is Saturday, October the 20th, and that will be same hours, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. at the Valemount Community Hall. Right next door to us here at 101 Gore Street. So please get out there, and if you need a ride, let people know. Get your friends out there and remind them, because it's important. We all want to see our community continue to grow and prosper, and that needs participation, right? So thank you very much, Sandy, for being here. Really appreciate it.
Sorry I do that all the time.
That's fine, yeah. It's been wonderful having you here. Best of luck in the campaign.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.